Well, good morning and welcome back to So You're Getting Divorced, the podcast, also known as SYGD now. For those of you who are getting a chance to actually see me, it's Dr. Sachin and I'm recording this bonus episode live so that you all can see what I do behind the scenes, but also because I've been asked to kind of put a face to the voice as you watch me record a bonus cast. So, this is a bonus episode for the podcast, and I want to talk about the changing idea of identity in marriage, especially in light of some of the things that have been happening recently in the news and recently, as in last week. We saw we saw in the country that I live in, the United States of America, we saw what was probably one of the most chilling and horrifying acts of my lifetime since 9/11, since I'm old enough to have lived through that. And that was the storming and potential destruction and acts of sedition that took place in our nation's capital. And it got me to thinking because I'm listening online, I'm listening, and I'm watching the footage unfolding. And it really hit home because some of the pictures that begin to emerge and that will emerge as time wears on is this idea of who were these people and how come their spouses didn't know, or why didn't their spouses tip someone off. And some of those spouses will begin to speak out because this is what happens, right? They'll begin to speak out about who this was not the person that they ever believed that they were married to, or they were shocked and appalled that this person would engage in this kind of behavior. And I'm here to just kind of say chances are that's incorrect. And so this bonus episode is really looking at, what does it really look like when someone in your life, the person that you're married to, is no longer the person that you thought you were married to. So this is it. Let's get into it. So through sickness and health till death do us part, or maybe not. Who are you? People make a very serious mistake when they believe that the person that they're married to is the same person that they were been married to day in and day out, and they stop paying attention. Life experiences, exposure to other people, time, health, family drama, life patterns, all kinds of things are just like water underneath the surface of the earth, right? We know that when water moves around the earth, it does something to the surface of the earth. And we may not see that something for a very long time. We may not have any idea that that sinkhole is forming out in the middle of the highway because we've diverted water supplies, or that a volcano is in fact getting ready to erupt from underneath the water because, it's out in the middle of nowhere and there's no one there to notice it, right? But not unlike those kind of natural phenomena or man-made phenomena that may happen, what happen we start to take the landscape of someone for granted. We start to look at that person as if that landscaping of that person is just never going to change. And so today we're going to talk about what are probably actually what is probably actually happening in these relationships, and briefly why the person that you married and the person that you might have seen committing an act of domestic terrorism were always present, but you just didn't see them. And we'll do that right after a word from our sponsors. So hey, I'm back. All right. So if you listen to this on your favorite podcasting network, you'll hear a short ad from um, one of my sponsors. For those of you who are getting to watch the video, you just get me. But don't worry, I have on the outro for the video, you'll also get a plug from me because I'm my own sponsor as well. So, like I said, this is a short bonus video. And to be perfectly honest, it really came about because in the quest to understand, we are, our nature as humans is to go, I've known this person forever. There's no way that they could have engaged in this kind of behavior. I would have noticed, or why didn't a spouse notice, or why didn't a family notice, or why didn't someone notice? And um, we want to believe that the person who's behaving in certain ways must have just like overnight something happened. I don't know what happened. They were not this way. They were at the Piggly Wiggly or we had an Instacart delivery a week ago. They were not planning some radical incursion off somewhere that's not home. Okay, so they probably were. You just didn't notice it. You just didn't notice it. So there are three things that I think that are important to be addressed because it's going to become really easy in the coming days for a lot of people who are related to these individuals who are being arrested, and the people who incited these individuals to act. There's going to be a lot of shifting of accountability. The I don't know that person. I don't know that person. That's not my husband. That's not the person that I married. So, and one of the things that we're going to hear, and we're probably going to start hearing very rapidly from some of the people who are in closest proximity to these particular individuals, is it's like they just changed overnight. I don't know what happened. One minute we were this God fearing, loving family, or he was this amazing, or she was this, wonderful, blah 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 blah, fill in the blank. And then the next minute, just the next minute, like it was like they were just a whole different person. No, it's not. It didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen overnight. And so I'm talking to you, the person who is sitting there listening to me, going, but Dr. Sasheen, it's like he was a whole different person, or she was a whole different person, or I didn't even see this coming. Yes, you did. Here's the thing. This didn't happen overnight. You just stopped paying attention. Remember my analogy about water under the earth and the landscaping? The reality is that most of us know when there's something wrong with our yard. We can look out there and go, gosh, dang it, there's a brown patch in my yard and I can't figure out what's going on with it. Now, I can just assume that my yard's going to decide to turn itself green again, or I can acknowledge that there might be a mole in my yard burrowing underneath the surface, killing my grass. Or there may be a problem in my yard with termites that might actually be infecting my house, but you know, I'm not going to say the day my house falls down, oh my gosh, it just like it fell down overnight. No, it didn't. All the signs were around you that your house is falling down, but you chose to ignore that. And here's the thing. Chances are the reason it looks like it happened overnight, the change in the person that you're with, the change in the spouse that you just knew that you knew that you knew, that change feels like it happened overnight for two reasons. Number one, we have this belief in ourselves, and it's a wonderful belief, but it's quite self-serving and very dangerous, that we will instinctively know if our spouse changes anything major about themselves, ergo their core belief system. Like we would know that. And if we would know that, then here's the problem. Either they've always been this way and we just accepted it, or we're not as intuitive as we think we are. And nobody wants to admit that they are not as intuitive as they think they are. Nobody wants to admit that perhaps they didn't see it coming. But that is a lot more palatable for a lot of people than the first one, which is they've always been this way. They've always been this way, and you just chose to ignore it. But we'll get to that in a minute. And so because instinctively we believe we would pick up on some major rumbling underneath the surface, remember that sinkhole? No one ever sees it coming. But because we believe that when our spouse does something, when our significant other does something that's so beyond the pale, we go, well, it's like overnight they just became this person, because I would have known, right? I would have known. I would have known, or of course they would have shared that with me. But here's the other piece to this. If you are going through something, your spouse may be the last person that you're going to share it with, because you may find that they are no longer a safe space. Or you may not want to rock the boat because you know you've got some big things happening over here, but you're also trying to protect your livelihood over here, which is why so many of these folks are losing their minds and losing their jobs and recognizing that their livelihood has been impacted by their behavior. And so now it's of course I didn't, of course my spouse would have told me, but your spouse may in fact have also been trying to maintain a fairly even status quo so that you didn't recognize what was happening over here. So instinctively you didn't know and they didn't tell you, so you say, well, it's like that happened overnight. But this leads to the second point. This is not the person that I knew. It happened overnight and this is not the person that I knew. Okay. You did know. You did know. But like most people in relationships with people who are really good, and if you haven't picked up my book yet, Who Did You Love? 4 Faces of Narcissism, this is a good time to go get that one. Like most people in relationships with people who do something that's so beyond the pale, there is a pattern of dismissing the red flag. There is a pattern of dismissing things that makes you uncomfortable. There is a pattern of minimizing behavior because, well, yes, they kind of do this, but it's not that big of a deal. They at least don't do this. And so it's like they just happened overnight is result of, well, this is not the person that I knew, because the person that I knew would never do this. And this is, in fact, the person that you knew, but you've spent so much time, effort, and energy building a series of walls between yourself and that particular behavior that it's really easy to ignore that behavior that's going on and to make excuses when it breaches your wall to say, well, is that really that big of a deal that he does this or she says that? Is it really that big of a deal that he's got these weird friends that sometimes they like to go off and, do some things that are maybe not all that great for morality or society, but they're harmless, so what's the big deal? Which leads me to the final piece of this bonus episode, because I'm going to keep it short and sweet, because I want you to hear it and I want you to play it again and hear it again. This is the final piece to the trifecta of it's like they just changed overnight and this is not the person that I knew. That's the second excuse. Number 3 is, well, it's not my fault that they, and fill in the blank. And let's be clear, you are correct. It is not your fault. Adults are in fact responsible for adult behavior. And though your spouse may engage in illicit, illegal, immoral, amoral, whatever activity, it's not your fault. You didn't do it. You don't have to correct that. It's not your behavior that you need to correct. It is not your fault that the person that you share your life with turned out to be or turned into somebody that you are like, that's not me. That's not us. But what you are not going to be able to do is distance yourself from that. It's not your fault, but you cannot distance yourself when the person that you share your life with chooses to engage in behavior that directly impacts and hurts another person. You don't get to go, well, that's on them. My husband is my husband or my wife is my wife and I can separate that box. No, you actually can't, because you are now part of them. Your narrative is now intertwined with theirs. And so you have to determine and you have to decide what you're going to do about it. And hoping and praying that time will heal all wounds, well, the divorce rate still hovers at around 40%, maybe a little bit higher depending on second marriages. That is consistent through time and time and time. So what we understand is hope, and people don't forget. And in the age of 24/7, 365 social media, forget everything else, just that, and the fact that everyone shares everything all the time and that the internet never forgets, means that the transgressions of your significant other are going to follow you and your children for a long time to come. So you may not be at fault, because obviously it's not your fault. Even if you did turn a blind eye, and even if you did make excuses, it's still not your fault for the behavior of an adult. That is their issue. But what becomes your reality is that you are now painted and tainted by those decisions. And you got to make some choices about whether or not you're going to continue to make excuses and pretend like you didn't see it, or if you're going to recognize that I am now just as nasty as this person that I'm attached to. And whatever the choice may be, because we hear all about forgive or not forgive or whatever. Whatever line you choose to stand on and draw in the sand, just recognize that the person that you're now married to, you've got to come to grips with who they have now become. And you are now also that person. And that, my friend, as you're listening or watching this, that is something that not only you get to embrace, but your children will also have to embrace, and their children, until enough generations pass that people just don't talk about you anymore. But let's remember, we still talk about scandals 100 years later for folks who've been long dead and long gone. So that's it. The bottom line for this particular bonus cast is that there's a lot happening in the world, and relationships are going to take a huge hit, and a lot of people are going to come out making a lot of different claims and whatnot about what happened, and this is not, this is like this person just changed overnight, and that's not the person that I knew, and this is not my fault, and all that's grand and great. But the reality is that too many relationships are built on these paper thin beliefs that the people that we're with will never change, and that if they do, we'll somehow magically know that they're changing, and we will be able to do something about it. And even if we can't do something about it, they won't do something that's so beyond the pale that we can't bring them back from that we can't reel them back in and make them a better person again. Those are beliefs that are being called into question these days about a lot of different relationships, whether they're romantic, friendly, peer, or business. And the question becomes for our society now is, if we do nothing about the state of our country, can we do something about the state of the relationships that have led to the state of our country? No, we cannot. We surely can't. And so I try not to get too political in this podcast, but I think it's important to recognize that the people who have engaged in some really heinous behavior, they're gonna go home and they're gonna look their spouses in the face, or their significant others, their boyfriends, their girlfriends, their parents, their kids. And the people that they're looking at, the ones that they're looking at, the people they're looking in the eye, have to decide whether or not they're ready to go with that person all the way to the end, or if it might be time to figure out which lifeboat they need to get on. That's all I got today.